We're back, we're back, we're back, we're back. We're the three best friends that anybody had, and we are together again. Oh, it feels so good. Andy Behrens, Matt Harmon, I'm Jason Fitz. It's Fantasy Football Live. Harmon got the week off last week. The beard is back. I don't know what to do. Behrens last week had a bunch of hair. He doesn't. Harmon's back with the hair. I'm wildly confused. Matt, did you miss us? Because we missed you, buddy.
Yeah, totally. I really missed you guys. Thought about never coming back, to be honest. You know, I mean, the paycheck is nice. You guys are all right. But look, I came back for the people, to be honest. The people is who I came back for, helping them with their fantasy football lineups. That's the treat, the joy, the pleasure of my lifetime. So, no, on a serious note, it's good to be back with you boys.
I will at least point out that you were referenced multiple times. We just decided that you dressed as Casper the Ghost, the friendly ghost for the Halloween show, so nobody could see you. It worked out perfectly. Behrens still.
I didn't watch, so I don't know what happened. I mean, God, you guys could have said anything. I didn't watch a second of the show while I was gone, so I just trust it was all nice and wonderful things. And James Coe especially. I mean, I know he would never ever say anything bad behind my back.
Yeah, he was forced to defend.
Yeah, he was absolutely lovely. I do feel like Harmon owes us a costume. It doesn't have to be this week. It just has to be at some point over the balance of the season.
I mean, Behrens as George Kittle was unforgettable. Harmon's already taken the high road. Okay, it's time to look at our fantasy game changers for this week, powered by Ram Trucks. You know what we like to do. We give you a word we associate with Ram Trucks, and then a player that we also associate with that word. Matt, you get the first word, and the first word is versatile. What do you think of with versatile?
Yeah, when I think versatile, I think Bills wide receiver Khalil Shakir. While I was not watching your guys' show, I did get to watch the Thursday Night Football game while I was out last week. And I'll tell you what, guys, what I saw was a team that accidentally stumbled into the best version of themselves. They came into this year with this whole, we're going to have 2 tight ends and teams are going to match us in base personnel. We're even going to call it 11.5 personnel to be cutesy. Well, everybody saw what they were doing. You're trying to make Dalton Kincaid a slot receiver. He's not a slot receiver, okay? So teams just ended up matching him in base or nickel personnel, not base personnel. And the offense wasn't that good. Well, last week without Dawson Knox, they ran out with 11 personnel on 78% of their plays. They were 26 with 53.8% coming into this game. Khalil Shakir, I think, actually gives him a little bit of pop from that slot receiver position. I really liked him a lot as a prospect. Not only is he versatile enough to add a boost to his own fantasy stock, right? I think he's a kind of a sneaky pickup still at this point. He makes Kincaid better. They made Gabe Davis better last week because of this usage, and even Steph Diggs and Josh Allen get a boost as well. So honestly, Khalil Shakir, shout out to him. He's just making the entire Bills offense better.
Yeah, you do know, Harmon, you could have just turned us on the phone, right? Like you could have had us on your phone while you were watching, while you were out with your friends.
I was busy. I was out with my friends.
I mean, you were watching Thursday Night Football. Okay, fine. Let's go on. My word is luxury, and I have to look at my own fantasy football bench and realize that I was an idiot. I made a stupid decision repeatedly over and over and over again, and I've learned from it because I have the luxury of having Taysom Hill on my bench, and now he's not on my bench anymore. Taysom Hill is luxury, not just for fantasy football players, but also for the Saints. And frankly, I can't believe I missed this. Think about it. Derek Carr's biggest deficiency is as a red zone quarterback. So what are the Saints doing every single week of late? They are letting Taysom Hill put up big points for fantasy and for real football because realistically, they need him in to make a difference when you have a quarterback that's not effective enough in the red zone. I can't believe I didn't see it coming. I can't believe for 3 straight weeks I've left him on my bench. No more. I have the luxury of Taysom Hill going against Chicago this week, and I'm going to make the wrong right by playing him. And everybody's going to see that this is just part of how the Saints score points. He is a luxury to have on your roster, a luxury for them to have as a team. Sorry that happens to be against Chicago Bears, but that leads us to you. Your word is fast. What do you think of when you think fast?
Oh, please. I'm picking on the Bears as well. I'm going to go Rashid Shaheed of the Saints. He's one of the few non-Miami Dolphins who actually pops up on the sprint speed leaderboard at Next Gen Stats, right? He's hit 21 miles an hour more than once. That whole leaderboard is like Tyreek Hill, Raheem Mostert, Achane. But then there's Shaheed. He's coming off a game with 3 separate big plays, including a 58-yard touchdown. He now has 3 different games with 80-plus receiving yards and over 15 fantasy points, including Week 8. Of course, there are going to be quiet weeks. He's a vertical threat who rarely sees more than, say, 5-6 targets in a game. but this is the perfect way to use your flex spot or a wide receiver 3, right? Don't just start the player that you think is most likely to score like 5 points. Take a shot with someone who can actually win your week, and that has been Shaheed.
No matter what you're looking for in a light-duty truck, the 2023 Ram 1500's got you covered. You can score yours at ram.com. Okay, so hashtag AskFFL. That's how you guys get in on the conversation. You know that. We're going to help you make some picks. We're going to look at some tough flex decisions with multiple players for users that were submitted through social media and through the fantasy app. Always love this part. We'll see what some of these questions look like. And we start with the best name in all the business. Jason gives us first with Jason Quinn. Says, thoughts on who to play at flex and wide receiver 2. Half PPR need to. Cooper, Pickens, Charbonnet, Ford, and Nico Collins. Harmon, what do you got on this one?
This is a good one. Zach Charbonnet kind of impressed last week, but I don't know that he's like in the starting category just yet. I think Nico Collins bounces back big at home against Tampa Bay. I think that actually should be a pretty pass-heavy game on both sides because neither one of those teams can run the ball effectively. And while Amari Cooper is definitely not as juicy with Deshaun Watson still likely out of the mix, I think it's a good enough matchup, and he's a good enough player that he's a guy you've got to consider starting here. So I'll go Nico and Amari Cooper.
Okay, well, you didn't watch last week. I killed Amari. Amari's dead to me. Like, he was in our graveyard segment, so I can't allow that.
Well, also, yes, I did not watch. Again, I did not watch last week. I cannot make that clear enough.
Are we going to allow the flippant word of the usage of the word juicy on this show too? Like, juice, Amari Cooper being described as juicy Barons? Are we allowing this? Oh, God.
I'm gonna leave that adjective entirely to Harmon.
Okay.
You can have
All
it.
right.
Got it.
You know what? Let's just keep moving on. JGG says, need to pick 3 of the following. Addison, Nacua, Cooper, Downs, Devontae Adams. Okay, what do you got on this one? Andy.
Man, these are very good players. Let's start there. We got a lot of guys here who have new quarterbacks and or retread quarterbacks this week. So this is a little dicey. Downs is a great player, but he picked up an injury designation midweek, and that is often pretty bad. So I'm going to steer clear of him. I'm going to go, I'm just going to go with the best and most productive players on general principle here. I got to keep rolling out Devontae Adams. He's too good. They miss him all the time, but he's too good. Puka Nacua as well. Presumably still going to get peppered with targets. And then I'm probably going to go Amari Cooper. Again, we're not dealing with any good quarterbacks here, so that's off the table. But for me, this is probably Nacua, Cooper, and Adams.
I think you're probably right about that. Also, I think any of the 3 of us could have hit those 2 touchdown passes to Devontae that Jimmy G missed in the last game. I'm not still hurt, though. It's fine. I'm good. I'm fine. Fantasy players everywhere just still heard about that one. Let's get the next question up for Harmon on this one. Gaffney says, need to fill 1 wide receiver spot in flex. Have Deontay Johnson, Jacoby Myers, Nico Collins, and Zay Flowers. Please help. I like this because you've been a fan of a couple of these players on here, so I like putting you on the spot.
Dude. I'm a fan of like all of these players. This is tough. I'll avoid the Raiders disaster on this one. No offense, Fitzy, but it is what it is. Disaster seems nice, honestly. Although I think the vibes are going to be much better there. We'll talk about that later. So yeah, no Jacoby Myers for me. I did say nice things about Nico Collins and Deontay Johnson so far in this program. It is between those 2 guys for me. And I think I will go Deontay Johnson here. The volume is just so good. Even with the banged up quarterback, I think he's good enough in this matchup to maybe finally score a touchdown. That'd be nice.
Why do you hate Zay Flowers? She didn't even mention him. I just wondered why you hate Zay.
Trying to save time on this program.
All right, let's go to the next question from Tanner Christie asking, Michael Pittman, Rashee Rice, DeAndre Hopkins, or George Pickens need to have PPR. Barons, what do you think?
Oh man, I know I said I wasn't going to use the word juicy, but there are some juicy matchups here. I really
Here we go.
These are all fine options. It's a great spot for Pittman against Carolina, and he's a great player, so I'm going to go there. I'm definitely starting Michael Pittman. And then I'm going to go DeAndre Hopkins as well. I know he's been on the injury report, but he's been playing through that basically all season. He's facing a Pittsburgh defense that pretty much allows a perimeter wide receiver to go off every week so far, and he's coming off a pretty good game, so it's got to be Hopkins and Pittman for me.
I just want to remind you guys, spicy would be good. Like, hey, this is spicy, or beefy. Like, that's a beefy matchup. I'm all in for that. Like, juicy and moist belong in the same category of like things we just don't need to say, okay, pull up the next one now that America's just sitting here wondering what the hell we're doing. Zach says pick 2 out of James Cook, Moss, Flowers, and Dell. Harmon, what do you got?
Finally, we get one that's like, reflective of, all right, there's some bye week troubles here. Like every question we've gotten so far, it's just like, look at all of these great options I have. You don't even need to write into the show with all these great options. You're fine. Now, if we're looking at 2 options here, ooh, this one is difficult. I think I'm going to go Zach Moss. Every week it feels like this is the week that Jonathan Taylor is going to take a step forward. And it just doesn't happen because Zach Moss is playing well enough. Shane Steichen says they're going with the hot hand. Maybe there's an injury situation with JT, but I think Zach Moss in a good matchup against Carolina is still an option here. The other one I'll go with is Tank Dell. Mentioned that I think that game is going to be very pass friendly. I think a lot of the receivers are in good situations there. We typically see this where teams play 2 high safeties. The number 2 receiver actually goes off in those 2 high matchups. Nico Collins is the number 1. Tank Dell's the number 2. I like Tank Dell to have a nice big game in this one as well.
All right, let's get another one in here from William. William says Christian Watson, Cam Akers, Devin Singletary, Jackson Smith, and Jigba for my flex. None are a slam dunk. All seem to have potential, at least to me. What do you think on this one, Behrens?
Yeah, I guess I'll just say that the one that doesn't necessarily have obvious potential is probably Cam Akers. I understand that people are waiting maybe for him to surge ahead of Alexander Mattison in that backfield hierarchy. Cam has not been great this year, and he's coming off a game in which he played like 17 snaps. So he's out for me. He's not really part of this discussion. I can see it with Christian Watson, but I'm probably going to go Devin Singletary, who could be stepping into a huge workload. Dameon Pierce hasn't practiced yet this week, didn't practice on Thursday. Man, if he can't go on Friday, we're looking at a lot of touches for Devin Singletary. It's not an ideal matchup against Tampa, but still, there's a potential here for 20 touches. So that's where I've got to go.
You guys can keep the questions coming. Hashtag AskFFL. We'll get more lineup help going as we go throughout the show. In the meantime, Austin Ekeler and Matt had the chance to talk about some midseason surprises on Ekeler's Edge, including one veteran surprise even for players in the league. Check this out.
We wanted to offer up some of our biggest surprises of the first half of the season. So we'll each go with 3 here. Let's alternate.
Okay, so my number 1 was Raheem Mostert.
He's on my list too, actually.
He's on your list?
Both Dolphins running backs were on my list.
Nice.
Devin Achane, the rookie, and Raheem Mostert, man.
Because, man, Raheem, like, every time he's been healthy, like, you can go look at his stats from the past. The minimum he's averaged is 4.9 yards a carry. He is so dynamic. And he's on the Dolphins, who just have a dynamic offense in general, but man, he's looking good.
He was on my list. Another guy on my list, though, my biggest surprise, I mean, it's got to be Rams wide receiver, the rookie Puka Nacua. Puka has caught 61 passes for 795 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not only is that obviously the best performance from any rookie receiver so far this year, he is 3rd among all wide receivers in receiving yards, and he's 4th among all receivers in fantasy points. So he's got to be one of the biggest surprises to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely been one of the standouts. Another one for me, who has been a guy who's actually been there, done that, but kind of, there are people that were kind of like, yeah, we'll see how it goes. And even his team, because now he's on a new team, but Adam Thielen.
He's on my list as well.
Let's go. Hey, we think, we're on the same page here.
Yeah.
A guy that was kind of, consistent and, his team's like, maybe he's not the number 1 guy anymore like he was. And now with Carolina, he's on pace for, another 1,000-yard season. And, man, he's been really showing out over there for Carolina.
Yeah, and he was, like I said, he was going to be on my list as well. I'll just throw one more out here. Travis Etienne, to me, has been a big surprise. He's the 2nd highest scoring running back right now. 7 touchdowns so far this year on the ground, 1 through the air. And I would argue, Austin, that not only has he been a really good player in fantasy, and he's obviously been good for the Jaguars, but because their defense has been better than expected and their run game has been better than expected, it's why, like, their passing game hasn't quite clicked all the way, but they're still 6-2. And I think a lot of it is because of those 2 factors being better than expected.
I would 100% agree. I was watching this guy's game the other day. He's dynamic. He's running hard. He's in the right spots. He's making people miss. He is playing at, yes, an elite level right now. I would 100% agree with you. That is a great pick. I should have put that one on there. Would 100% agree. My last one was Sam Laporta. Guy who's just been consistent and kind of was like, oh, yeah, like, there was expectations for this guy, but it was like, man, he's really come alive in that role with the Lions at the tight end spot. So that was my last little surprise standout.
All right, let's take a look at some of the fantasy chatter from this week. The most talked about players in the fantasy app. Love that you can get into these and chime in on the app. Devontae Adams, one of the comments from Mike, starting with confidence versus this matchup. Last time O'Connell was quarterback, he got 13 targets. Also some comments on Darrell Henderson, Dante Forma. We'll get to those in a second. Let's start with the Devontae portion of this conversation, though, because Barons, I mean, I think this actually does make sense. It's what I've already mentioned 3 or 4 times. But if you're Aiden O'Connell and you're a new offensive coordinator for the Raiders, they blew everything up. We'll talk about that later in the show. But, I mean, frankly, what makes sense? Drop back, find Devontae, throw Devontae the football. Like, I think there's a real opportunity for Devontae to put up big numbers this week.
Yeah, there are some simple answers in this offense, right? Like, it is Devontae Adams, it is Josh Jacobs, it's Jacoby Myers. They have great skill players. So I agree with the premise here, and I think that O'Connell over the course of the season is going to be good enough to support a couple of viable fantasy receivers. I'm not particularly worried about that. I will just say that targets have not been Devontae's problem. Like, it's not like he wasn't targeted last week. He probably led the week in unrealized air yards. He was just missed constantly. So I wouldn't get hung up on targets with this guy anymore. We need to actually see somebody complete passes to him.
Okay, one step at a time. Let's pull this up, though, because I got to get Harmon's thought on Donta Foreman. The comment here that came in from Trent, I'm stashing this man. If I need him, I'll know my season is ended. He'll be my canary in the coal mine. All right, what do we think on that one, Harmon?
Well, it is nice to know that you've got like a player, you know, if you got to start this guy, you're just waving the white flag, the season's over. It's nice when you have that kind of clarity. So a shout out to you for knowing that. And look, unfortunately, I think Deontay Foreman is a really good running back. I think he is the type of guy that when his team has a lead and they can just like put the ball in his hands, put the ball in his belly over and over again, you're going to get some really juicy rushing looks from Deontay Foreman. But the problem is when the team falls behind, there are negative game scripts, and when they're split in the backfield 3 ways, like the Chicago Bears are right now, you're right. I mean, look, if you got to start him, you're banged.
We're just gonna let that juicy thing go again. We're just
once per block, Fitzy, get ready. You'll never know I'm going to drop it in the sea.
Oh my God, this is terrible. You know, the only thing worse than the number of times juicy has been said in this show, the number of times I've had to give you all this very important reminder. Set your lineups early. Sunday morning, there's an international game. Now, I'm not ever a fan of this, but 9:30 a.m. Eastern, we get Miami taking on Kansas City in Germany. Remember, a couple of things here for everybody. The daylight savings time thing is also Sunday. So like we spring forward, so we fall back. So the time change is going to be there, and you've got an early. You're going to need set alarms. All right, set your lineup Saturday night, 9:30 a.m. But this is a huge matchup between the Dolphins and the Chiefs. Obviously, this is a game that we're going to have all eyes on. Andy, what stands out to you as interesting in this?
Yeah, I really just want to point out how unusual it is that Patrick Mahomes right now is the QB3 in fantasy on the year, and none of his wide receivers are in the top 40 in terms of fantasy scoring. We've hyped Rashee Rice previously, and he may eventually crack the top 40 for fantasy. His snaps are up, the red zone targets have been there, but like we should also note that Rice hasn't actually seen more than 7 targets in any game, and he hasn't hit 75 receiving yards yet. He's still just sort of a star that we're trying to wish into existence. Meanwhile, if you put together like a low light reel of the worst drops in the NFL this season, it would be a whole lot of Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore. Mahomes has been a magician. Travis Kelce is still the best in the business at tight end, but this offense is not quite vintage Chiefs at the moment. Kansas City led the NFL in scoring last year, and they are outside the top 10 right now. They're putting up about 6 fewer points per game. Miami's defense has been cooked by top receivers all year, but Kansas City just doesn't seem to have any of those. So Rice is the closest thing to trustworthy. He's played 60% of the snaps in the last 2 weeks. He's the only one here that I'd really be willing to start with any confidence at all.
Yeah, look, you're 1,000% right. And from a fantasy angle, I think both teams have trustworthy issues. Let's say I don't have a lot of trust, but I have to like pull my soapbox over here and just mention to the world that it is an absolute disgrace that this game is happening in Germany. Think about what this game is, and think about what we spent all summer hearing. We spent this summer hearing Tyreek Hill tell the world how great his current quarterback is and how much better it was than where he was before. Look at that scene in Kansas City. Those fans aren't going to get the home game they deserve to boo recklessly against Tyreek. Those fans lost this game. The entire NFL fan base lost the chance to watch Tua and Tyreek try and go into Arrowhead and do something special. They lost the opportunity to watch Miami go in and try and be the dynamic offense that Tyreek has been saying they were, and we lost a chance to see that in Kansas City. I don't trust the Chiefs offense, and I don't trust Miami against any good team, but I also at this point don't trust the NFL to not screw things up, because this game should have been in Arrowhead. I will now step off my soapbox and I will defer to you, Matt. I'm angry.
Fitz, I mean, the poor Chiefs fans aren't going to get this game at home. Oh, no. What's a group of people we really need to feel bad for? I mean, come on. We're trying to grow the game internationally.
A, we shouldn't be trying to grow the game internationally. B, like, how mad are you or London? If you're a London fan, you spent the last 10 years watching the damn Jaguars, and now the first game in Germany, and they're like, let's go ahead and give you Dolphins, Chiefs. The amount of just gross on this. Go ahead. This thing, there's nothing juicy about this matchup.
Well, disagree, because I'm not going to use the word, because I'm going to save it for the C block. You got to be surprised. You can't just see it coming, Fitz. Come on. Jalen Waddle. Really nice usage, really beefy usage, actually, the past few weeks, if you want to say it that way, compared to what we saw in weeks 1 to 4. Weeks 1 to 4, 18% target share for Jalen Waddle. Weeks 5 to 8, 28%. A little bit more of what we were kind of expecting coming into the season. It looks like Waddle is going to be able to, as long as his usage keeps up, sort of clear this kind of muck, the mire of the rounds 2 to 3 wide receivers who really haven't been all that good, like the guys that were picked around the turn. I'm not talking about if A.J. Brown or CeeDee Lamb slipped to the second rounds in your league, pipe down. I'm talking about the guys that were like the 1B receivers, like Devontae Smith, like T. Higgins, like Jalen Waddle. He looks like he might be able to break out from that group right now. And I think the big thing here is 45 rushing yards, 78 rushing yards the last 2 weeks for this team. I maintain that the only reason that Jalen Waddle kind of took a back seat early in the season was Mike McDaniel was, justifiably so, obsessed with his new toy that was the running game, right, with Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane. We'll see if Waddle cedes target share to the rush attempts when Achane gets back and everything like that. But for now, I do think while the run game's not working, Waddle can return and be their counterpunch.
All right. Speaking of returning, you have returned to our show to hang out with us, and that means it's time for an update on primetime picks. And I just can't believe this. I cannot believe I'm sitting here saying this. Harmon didn't even show up last week. He submitted his picks remotely. We can't even really tell you all of a sudden. And what do we have here? So we have Harmon winning last week. He wins handsomely last week. I mean, by that's a
handsomely.
Handsomely last week. So we now have a tie again for first place, but because of total points, I am edging out. So what feels like the 52nd week in a row, y'all got to make me pick last. And the feels like the 52nd week in a row, Barron's, man, I don't think he understands the rules of this contest. But before we get to the actual pick this week, I want to remind everybody, Leonard Fournette, speaking of ice cold, is back in the league. And I thought maybe, speaking of Barron's being cold, this is what Fournette tweeted out. No lie, Buffalo colder than a Penguin's ass out here, Lord. Follow-up question for the group. Is a penguin's butt colder than a penguin's stomach? Because don't they lay down on their stomach when they travel? I've never seen a penguin cop a squat. So Harmon, I just feel like penguin's stomach is colder than penguin butt.
I don't know. I'm Googling penguins on ice right now just to kind of follow up on and give the correct answer here. I mean, I will say, Fitz, I do see a lot of penguins, what I'm looking at right now, walking on their little feetsies, on the ice and everything like that. So I would say that their butts are close to the ice probably more often. What did I say?
I know, but I'm saying their feet. Their feet. Okay, so their butts close to ice, and that makes it ice cold. Okay.
I mean, obviously he's trying to get engagement, bro, and we're engaging with this because of the word choice that he used. We're engaging with it, man. If he had said penguin's belly, no one's retweeting that. Okay.
Look, I'm just asking for factual accuracy. All right, so here we go. You guys know the rules. Obviously, we give you one player, I should say, from each night of action. So tonight we have Titans Steelers, then we have Bills Bengals, and the Penguin putt, and then we have Chargers Jets. Those are the 3 games to pick from. You can only pick one player from each of those nights. Andy, you are on the clock for it now. I want to remind you, Andy, the goal here is to get the most points. So for what is like the 87th week in a row, you are picking first. The goal is to get the most fantasy points. Who would you like to take first?
Well, had that been explained to me earlier in the season, perhaps the results of this contest would be a little bit different. I actually think that we should replace this whole thing with a segment where we just parse the tweets of Leonard Fournette each week. That would be better than this. Let's see. I'm gonna go with that Penguin-ass game, and I'm gonna go with Jamar Chase. He's got 3 straight games with at least a dozen targets. He's got over 70 receiving yards in each of his last 5 games. Joe Burrow looks pretty good, and the Buffalo defense is without some key weapons. So yeah, give me Chase.
All right, that means Matt, you're up, and the entire world is your oyster. What would you like to take first?
Yeah, alas, a terrible pick by Barons at number 1 overall, because he can't see that this is T. Higgins' breakout game that's coming here, which, maybe Barons, if you stopped thinking about the damn kicker props and got your head in the primetime picks game, you wouldn't be having this conversation. I will stick in this game, though, and I will take the correct receiver from that game first, and I'm going to take Stefon Diggs. I mean, a guy who literally never lets me down, hasn't let me down since I had a full head of hair and glasses and all that. It's been quite some time since Stefon Diggs has ever let me down. So I'm going to go ahead and take him here, the correct pick.
So what's beautiful about this is strategery, right? You can only pick from one, and you guys have both taken Bills Bengals off the board. So now I have no need, because I think you are right, Harmon. This could be a breakout game for T. Higgins, but I don't have to do that right now because y'all can't pick from that game. So I'm instead I'll wait and I'll do that game at the end. Instead, I'll take a couple guys I think right now as I go around the turn that can help me. Austin Eckler, obviously he's a teammate for us, so I'm going to take him there. Although there are good other options in that game, I think Austin Eckler obviously is an easy one to pick. And then because I do think tonight, points are going to be at a premium. I think that running the ball is going to be the safest thing for the Titans to do to try and protect Will Levis. I could see Derrick Henry getting a couple of touchdowns on some short yardage stuff. So I'm actually going to go running back. Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry take me around the turn. And that brings us back to Matt.
See, I just out-strategied you, actually, because my thought at second overall, I did think about taking my good pal Austin Eckler, but I'm invested in him enough. I don't need more creative ways for Austin Eckler to infiltrate my life. I'm good on that. No disrespect. But if you took him, that left me Breece Hall, who has been incredible so far this year, especially of late. I mean, that guy is absolutely cooking. He's one of the most explosive rushers in the NFL. So yeah, you just got out-strategied, Fitz. I was fine to take Steph Diggs, and I was okay if either one of those running backs made it back to me. You can clearly see, by the way, dear viewer, why Fitz and I are playing the sport the right way. I don't know what Andy's doing over there in the sandbox, but it's not good.
So far, Andy has taken a guy. Now you get 2 straight picks, Andy. For the love of all things holy, the goal here is to get 2 more players that can score you points. However you choose to do it, good sir.
I'm sorry, go over that part again. I want the
so
points.
You want points. Yes, you want points.
Right.
Yes. Flex points.
All
okay.
right. All right, I got it. Now I got it. I wish our producers had explained that to me. They didn't. It's fine. I'm gonna drop some analytics on you here. And DeAndre Hopkins, he's averaging 3 touchdowns per game during the Will Levis era. So I think I've got to go. Hopkins here. Again, that's been a really good matchup for outside receivers against Pittsburgh. So give me D-Hop, and then give me. This is tough, but I'm gonna go Keenan Allen. There's a couple players that I like in that game, but I'm gonna go Keenan Allen. Man, Garrett Wilson's playing so well. He's facing the league's most generous pass D. That's probably who I should pick, and yet I'm going to go with the overall wide receiver 5 on the season. That's Allen. I think I would just rather attach myself to Justin Herbert than Zach Wilson.
All right, that means Harmon, you're up. Who do you got? 1 player left.
Yeah, Andy doesn't realize he doesn't get a bonus for being over 30. There's no age bonus in this particular game. Talked a lot about Is there an age multiplier? I wasn't aware of that. I'll go with the boneheaded play multiplier and hope that applies to the Diontae Johnson experience tonight. Talked about it earlier. I mean, so much volume last week. I'm really hoping I don't run into the Barons prop curse with this one. So we'll see from like I'm putting myself in a little bit of a brain pretzel with this one because I run a root against Andy, but I still want to root for myself and Diontae Johnson. So yeah, let's go with Diontae Johnson here and the brain pretzel. I do think the volume and the separation is there for Diontae to have a big game here.
From Harmon's lips to the football god's ears, I walk up to the podium and I put in the name T. Higgins with my last pick in this week's Primetime Picks draft. I feel good about this. You know, that offense is coming on. That offense looks good. Feeling pretty strong about it. Also, I didn't really have any other options left in that game that I felt great about. So, you know, T. Higgins, it shall be in that one. Gabe Davis has hurt me too many times. I'm too Gabe Davis hurt to put him back in. So that's where we lie. We will let you know how we've done next week. Things are hot and heavy, at least between Harmon and I, because we both have, you know, wins. Andy's going to figure this thing out, though. You know, you never know.
Now that I know the rules, I'm coming.
No, well, one step at a time, man. Let's just hope that I want you just to have fun and compete next week. That's all we can ask for. Each week, we ask Sal Vetri to offer up unique fantasy advice here in the show. Let's check back in with Sal's 7 key findings for week 9, which include one name everybody needs to keep an eye on, even though he's on a terrible team.
These are the key findings that are going to help you win your Week 9 fantasy matchup. Finding number 1 takes us to a player who is trending down. And this player is James Cook, who's seen his passing game usage decrease the past few weeks, earning just 5% of the targets. And 33-year-old back Latavius Murray has actually been the one used in the 2-minute offense, and he's seen similar overall passing game work. Now, to make matters worse, the Bills just signed Leonard Fournette, who ranked 4th in running back targets last year and has always been trusted in pass protection by his coaches. Now, James Cook will still be a boomer bust production player because of his efficiency, but the consistent weeks are likely going to drop if Fournette gets involved. Now, finding number 2 takes us to the best spot of the week. And this is for Jerome Ford, who was limited by injury in week 8. That's why he only played 31% of the snaps. But Ford actually saw more usage in the second half in a close game situation against the Seahawks. Expect Ford to be the clear running back 1 this week as he's healthier and he finds himself in a great spot against the Cardinals' bottom 5 run defense. Arizona has allowed the 3rd most points to opposing running backs this season, and when Ford has been healthy, he's averaged a top 15 fantasy finish. Now, finding number 3 takes us to the sketchy spot of the week, and it's for Tony Pollard. Look, the Cowboys scored 43 points last week, and they won by 23, so Pollard had to have a good game, right? Well, wrong. Pollard scored less than 6 fantasy points on 13 touches before being pulled in the 4th quarter blowout. Now, his overall usage remains strong, but his efficiency has taken a hit, and it's coming at a bad time, because this week he takes on an Eagles run defense that has allowed the least rushing yards and least amount of fantasy points to opposing running backs. Our next finding is the pickup and play of the week, and this is the Patriots rookie receiver Demario Douglas, who over his last 2 games has ran 80% of the routes and earned 13 targets. The rookie was a training camp standout, and now he's getting a real opportunity in the regular season because both Devontae Parker and Kendrick Bourne were injured and did not return in week 8, and we got news that Kendrick Bourne will miss the rest of the season with a torn ACL. Now, Parker is dealing with a head injury, so there's a real chance that Demario Douglas has to operate as the Patriots' number 1 receiver in week 9 because last week he actually worked ahead of Juju Smith-Schuster despite Juju being healthy. And he has arguably the best matchup you can find because he'll face the Commanders, who allow the most points to opposing wide receivers. Finding number 5 is an offense that is trending up. And this is the Bengals offense because coming out of the bye week, Joe Burrow looks completely healthy, and this showed in week 8. He completed 88% of his passes and averaged nearly 9 yards per attempt against the 49ers' number 1 ranked defense. Now, this fueled big days for both Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon, and it makes T. Higgins a buy low in this offense after his 69-yard performance in week 8. And one more thing, the Bengals passing offense has a great playoff schedule for fantasy against the Vikings, Steelers, and Chiefs. Finding number 6 is a handcuff to add. And this is Zach Charbonnet after he saw a season-high 31% of the rush attempts last week. Charbonnet remained highly efficient, turning just 7 touches into 64 yards. Now, Kenneth Walker entered this game with an injury, which would explain his 44% of the snaps, a season low. I don't think Charbonnet's going to take over the job from Walker here. But Pete Carroll was talking up Charbonnet, the second-round rookie, after the game, and this just reminds us that he is one of the best handcuffs in fantasy, and he's available in the majority of leagues on Yahoo. Finding number 7 is a situation to monitor. And this would be Gabe Davis's usage and role in the Bills offense because it changed for the better this past week. Davis is known to be a boom or bust receiver who relies on downfield volume, but his average target distance cut in half in week 8. It was just 7 yards downfield on average. And this translated to a big day of over 19 fantasy points and a season-high 31% target share that led the team in week 8. Now, there was a clear reason for the shift in Davis's role. The entire offense changed because Dawson Knox was out. He's on IR, so they went to more 3 wide receiver sets instead of 2 tight end sets. And this led to more short area of the field targets for Davis. If this keeps up, he'll become a consistent fantasy option. And over the next 2 weeks, he'll be taking on the Bengals and Broncos bottom 5 secondaries. So these are the 7 key pieces of information that'll help you beat and smack around your buddies this week. Best of luck, and I'll see you in the next one.
All right, Sal, I always love drilling down on some of this with you because when I was watching the findings, thinking about Charbonnet in that conversation, efficiency versus usage is really difficult for everybody to figure out. So as the season goes on, how do you sort of weigh those? Somebody that's making the most, but also may have a crowded backfield.
Yeah, I think it's good to see, and usually you'll see this from talented rookies like a second-round rookie in Charbonnet. If they can be efficient, they'll continue to carve out a role for themselves. Maybe in a dynasty league, it becomes something that's more advantageous and just showing that they can actually find success in the NFL on their limited touches. So I think it's a good thing for him. But Kenneth Walker was also efficient in that game, had over 8 yards per carry. I think he was just a little bit banged up. This takeaway that we talked about is basically this is a great option, shouldn't be available in nearly 60% of Yahoo leagues.
Yeah, and it is interesting because I think both running backs are showing that they're going to be great players for the Seahawks. That just may not always make for the easiest fantasy decisions, right? Like 2 guys, 1 position. We'll see how it plays out. You can find more Sal on Yahoo Fantasy throughout the week. Of course, follow him at Salvetri. DFS is how you get there. So let's bring everybody in, do a little play calling here. You guys know the drill, all right? We get some user questions submitted via social media. We throw them out to everybody, and we see where it goes. No costumes this week. I don't know. I missed that. Maybe we make that a weekly thing. Eric comes up first. Eric says, start T. Higgins in my flex spot or James Cook, and Mostert or Gus Edwards for RB2. Sal, what do you think?
Yeah, I think for the start of this question, I'm going to be going with T. Higgins. We just talked about the Bengals offense. It looked fantastic, and Higgins didn't have this massive game, but 5 catches, nearly 70 yards is a solid performance for what was basically his first game back since week 3. Like, he had a couple of snaps. He played about 50% of the snaps and routes before the bye. There was some talk of him maybe being a decoy. He was back to a full-time role for the first time since week 3. I'll take him there. And then on the opposite side of this, for the running back talk, I'll go with Raheem Mostert. I'll just take the better game environment and a player who can get there in multiple departments, where Gus Edwards is mostly just going to get you there on the ground.
All right, let's go to the next question. This one will go to Matt Harmon, who is, by the way, dressed as a hunky lumberjack today. That is his costume. Start Keenan Allen versus the Jets, Sauce Gardner, or Rashee Rice versus Miami. What say you, Harmon?
I always like when they remind you the reason they don't want to start. Is that Adam Rank in that profile picture? We love to see it. We love to see a little bit of Adam Rank there. Yeah, I'll go with Keenan Allen, though, in this one. Like Andy said earlier, Rashee Rice, we talk a lot about him from a targets per route run standpoint. It's because he's not really running a full complement of routes. We haven't seen his skill set fully expressed as a breakout player either. So while I do think the ceiling on Keenan Allen is lower now that there's no real vertical threat in this offense, since Quentin Johnston hasn't emerged since Mike Williams went out with a torn ACL, I still think he's your safer option. We're not quite there yet with Rashee Rice.
All right, let's get the next question, and this one goes to Barons. Most importantly here, I don't know if anybody speaks Spanish. The handle, I've been told, means diamond hands in Spanish, but I don't speak Spanish, but I'm just, mano sta diamante. It just sounds cool. Jordan Addison or Garrett Wilson? What do we got on that one, Barons?
Yeah, we got Garrett Wilson. That's what we've got. He gets a defense that allows almost 8.5 yards per attempt, almost 300 passing yards per week. It is the most generous pass defense in the league. And Wilson, we were all bummed first week of the season. We thought his situation was going to be terrible. He's still on pace for 1,100 yards. This has been another pretty heroic season in not the greatest of circumstances for Garrett Wilson. I think he's the best player here, and he's just got an incredible matchup. Some might call it juicy. I won't. Others would.
Sal, how do we feel about the word juicy being used repeatedly in a fantasy football show?
I kind of like it. I mean, it hurts my ears a little
yes!
bit. I like it.
I'm losing. Okay. All right, Zach's the next question, asking Will Levis, Geno Smith, or Taylor Heineke. What do we think on that one, Sal? Hopefully, it's better than your juicy opinion.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to say kind of see how you're projected out for this week. Because if you look like you're a massive underdog, I'll just swing for the fences and see what's still left and maybe some of the unknown. We only have one game of Will Levis. But it looks like it's going to be a close game. Maybe you're a slight favorite. I'll go with Geno Smith here. He's been somebody who can get a top 15 quarterback performance. Not the same as last year. We've seen spikes. One half it's great. The next half it's not. Wide receivers have been banged up for most of the year. But last week it looked like DK Metcalf was finally healthy. 14 targets. Now he popped up today and in practice we have to track that. But kind of see where you are. If it looks like a close game, I'll go with Geno.
All right, let's get this one in from Adam, and I'll throw this to Harmon, just get a different opinion on the Seahawks portion of it. So start Tony Pollard or Kenneth Walker. Pollard is going against the number 1 rush defense, but it should be high scoring, and is Charbonnet really a thing? So Harmon, what say you?
Yeah, Charbonnet is really a thing. I mean, Pete Carroll was gushing about him in the press conference this week. I mean, Pete Carroll gushes about everybody, but everything that he said was pretty much verified by the film. The guy plays extremely hard. He's efficient. He's good in pass pro. He's good in the pass game. I do still think that Kenneth Walker is my pick here. My problem here with Tony Pollard is just like it's a little bit of a no-win situation where people want him to get less of these grinder carries and they want him to be used more in like space and be used as on outside runs and outside zone runs. Well, and guess what? The total carry count is going to come down there. So it's a little bit of a lose-lose proposition for Tony Pollard there. I do think the carries are going to come down for Kenneth Walker overall, and it's not an ideal matchup there either. But I think Walker has played better in the role given to him so far this year. So a tough call here, but I'll go with Kenneth Walker.
All right, Barons, you're up next, and this one comes from Mark with a little bit of explanation along the way. Full PPR, my wide receiver 3 spot is either Hollywood, bad matchup, new quarterback, Dobbs, touchdown dependent, or London, good matchup but hurt and may not play. What do you think?
I love when they give you a parenthetical that basically says, you know, I know this isn't going to go well, but I have to make a choice. Absolutely love it. Well, Drake London would be my hope. But it's a groin issue. He didn't practice on Thursday. Like if we're just reading tea leaves here, it doesn't look great for London. So you can hold out hope for him. I'd probably pivot to Dobbs. I think really the Arizona situation, which is probably just, you know, this weird QB situation for a week until Kyler comes back. I'm gonna, if I have viable alternatives, I'm going to play them over any receiver in Arizona right now.
All right, the last one goes to Sal, and this one comes from Eric, who asked, Foreman or Downs at flex position have lots of roster on bye. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Josh Downs here. So the rookie has now ran over 80% of the routes in 5 straight games. I mean, he's basically a full-time player. It's reflected in 7 targets per game for a middle-round rookie. And also, he's not just winning in the slot where he's playing every single snap, basically the most of any receiver this year in the slot, but he's also winning on the outside in small samples right now. But that's encouraging to see because it opens up some big plays. So I'll go with Downs, who continues to earn targets, right now ranking 7th against man coverage in the NFL.
Let's take a look as we get you ready for the entire weekend at some of the injury reports coming out of practices today. Some significant names on here. Darren Waller out with the hamstring. DeMarcado with the toe. Dameon Pierce ankle injury. And Drake London has not practiced this week. And to me, Barons, that one's kind of significant here because we have to also acknowledge that they've already made a quarterback change. Taylor Heineke is going to be the quarterback there. So now Heineke is a quarterback without Drake London. That seems significant to me.
Yeah, it does seem significant. Again, it doesn't feel like London's going to be able to go. It's a groin issue. I guess I'd be a little bit surprised, but I don't want to guess at it necessarily on Thursday. I will say I don't generally think of Heineke as a significant downgrade for anybody here, right? They probably needed to make a change. A lot of turnovers from Desmond Ridder. So I get it on the quarterback side. I don't like whatever your hopes were for Kyle Pitts, for Drake London. I don't think this changes anything. We just really need to monitor the health status for London. It would be great if he could come back to practice on Friday. That would be a great sign.
Would you, Harmon, would you be all in at this point on just getting rid of some of the Falcons on your roster from a fantasy standpoint, given the fact that we can't trust anybody at the quarterback position?
Well, I don't want to spoil what we're going to be talking about here with Taylor Heineke in just a second, but I might have a little bit more optimism for ODU's finest than you do, Jason Fitz, but we'll see. Look, I mean, listen, I get it. It's not a perfect solution, but, you know, I think Andy's right. A change did need to take place there.
Okay, we'll get to Heinicke in a second, but that takes us naturally to our next segment, Believe or Make Believe. We're going to take a look at some players around the league and figure out if they're for real or if they're make believe. Andy, give me somebody. Let's look at Gus Edwards for the rest of the season. Believe, make believe.
Yeah, I'm a believer. Gus was the overall RB1 last week, and he was the overall RB6 the week before. This is probably the most useful 2-game fantasy stretch of his career. He was also a huge winner at the trade deadline, right? Because Baltimore didn't add a back. We thought they might. He took advantage of a favorable matchup last week, but the previous game, he was facing Detroit. That's the league's number 2 run defense, and he still crushed. Gus missed a practice to start the week, but he made it back on Thursday. Said he was ready for a huge workload, so really no great concern related to the injury at all. Baltimore basically has one matchup remaining that is incredibly friendly for running backs. That's the Chargers coming up, and then they don't really have a stay-away matchup on the schedule the rest of season. So I'm a pretty big believer that Gus can be something like not just a startable running back, but like a top 10, top 12 fantasy back for the rest of the season.
All right, Matt, let's take a look at Believe or Make Believe on Taylor Heinicke. Is this an upgrade for the Falcons' offense?
I mean, shoot, it might be an upgrade for the Falcons defense if they can stay in some games here, which would be nice. For the Falcons offense, it's definitely, I think, a slight upgrade. And I'm talking slight here. Believe me, I've had a lot of time with ODU's finest, Taylor Heinicke. I've watched a lot of him dating back to his ODU days, and I saw a lot of him in Washington because I have a lot invested in Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson and Curtis Samuel. So I know the guy's game. I get it. I know he's not a superstar. He is definitely rather high on the rights checks that his arm cannot cash spectrum. However, the reason I think he is an upgrade here for the Atlanta Falcons, the biggest surprise about the Falcons offense so far this year, it's not weird player usage. It's not that Arthur Smith is cantankerous. We expected all of those things, but the biggest problem is that the offensive line is not playing up to standard, up to what we thought it would after they invested a lot in the position and the way it finished last season as well. And pass protection has been a huge problem, and Desmond Ridder has really struggled under pressure. His 9.4% sack rate is a top 10 mark among quarterbacks this season. Taylor Heinicke, not perfect in this regard, 7.1% in Washington in 2021, 6.8% though in 2022 when he started games, and he took only 1 sack last week after Desmond Ridder took 5 sacks in the first half of last week's game. So if you can just get the ball out, at least give guys like Drake London when he plays and Kyle Pitts when he's out there, give them some chances, I think he can be a slight upgrade. I do believe that.
And that, by the way, should speak quickly to the fact that I've talked to quarterbacks that played and offensive linemen that played, and they'll tell you that experience gives quarterbacks a better opportunity to call out coverages and to help their offensive line. So having somebody that can come in and understand that will actually help the Falcons. Not only that, but then you also add the internal clock that you that just improves the more reps you get. So I do think that there's room for the offense to look better under Heinicke. All right, Andy. Well, speaking of quarterbacks and offense, Josh Dobbs traded to Minnesota. So is he enough for Addison and JJ to hold their value?
Yeah, listen, I'm assuming that Jaren Hall doesn't have like a superstar game this week, and he's not the quarterback going forward. I think we're going to see Josh Dobbs pretty soon. And you know, I do want to mention about Josh Dobbs that like Hollywood Brown is the overall wide receiver 20 or 21 right now. So it's not like he wasn't supporting a viable starter at receiver. And he's obviously had Dobbs as his quarterback all year. Also, like you can piece together these big weeks from Zach Ertz, from Trey McBride, and you've got a top 5 fantasy tight end. So like he's fed some useful fantasy pieces. Dobbs has also thrown multiple touchdown passes in 3 of his last 5. So, you know, I don't think Justin Jefferson returns necessarily to his status as the no doubt obvious overall wide receiver 1. Don't even have to think about it. But I certainly think he can preserve top 10 value at the position. And I definitely think that Jordan Addison, who's shown us a lot, can continue to function as a wide receiver 2 for fantasy.
I think also the fact that the Vikings weren't aggressive unloading at the trade market tells you they believe that Dobbs can help them maintain that market also. Okay, Matt, let's get one more in here on the Cowboys. The Cowboys offense found a formula last week. Make believe or believe?
Oh, I believe this one, and really it's one of the few times I think we've actually seen the last couple of games, really the game before the bye against the Chargers too, them sort of play in a real sort of normal game script. Now, they did end up blowing out the Rams, but again, I think that is because they found a formula last week, specifically with wide receiver CeeDee Lamb. Look, and I'm saying we because I know I can do it, can overstate the whole, like, just throw it to your good player, like simplify things and just throw it to your good player. Not so much the case with the Cowboys offense. That was definitely deserved criticism with how they were treating CeeDee Lamb. And critically, Fitz, we saw him get a season-high targets lined up outside last week. Let's continue with that because there's nothing about this guy's game that says he can't win from the outside. He has to be a slot receiver. He's a matchup nightmare in there, but when you line him up outside in this Texas Coast offense, which, yes, I do want to shoot that phrase into the sun. I'm enough with Texas Coast. It's just the West Coast offense being run in Texas. We get it. But in this offense, the outside X receiver is the primary read more often than not. So yeah, when you line your best player up as the primary X receiver on the outside, he's going to get a boatload of targets like we saw last week. So I do think the formula here is enough to get CeeDee Lamb into the top 5 receivers perhaps rest of the season, even though that's a bit of a crowded mark. And I think it opens things up for Brandon Cooks to be a slot receiver and Jake Ferguson to be in better spots too. So I like what I saw out of Dallas's offense a lot last week.
No better way to prove that formula than taking on the Eagles in what is obviously one of the biggest games that we'll see all weekend. Okay, let's take a look at fantasy face-off. We love to have a player and then take a look at that player versus other players at the position to figure out what the right play is. And this week's player is one Derek Carr. Now, I said earlier that Taysom Hill is actually somebody that you should play as a luxury because Derek Carr struggles in the red zone. But let's be real, the Saints quarterback he's put up decent numbers this year. Like, it hasn't been bad for the Saints at this point with Derek Carr. So the question is either or, Derek Carr or, and I'm going to throw this first one to Bears, Derek Carr or Geno Smith.
Yeah, so Carr is he's coming off 3 straight 300-yard games. He just threw a couple of touchdown passes against Indy. You love the weapons, obviously. We talked about Shaheed. We've talked about Olave, Thomas. And he's also facing my Bears this week. That's the league's number 30 pass defense. They allow the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. So I'm gonna lean Carr here. Geno's got, he's got Baltimore this week. That's a team that's got more interceptions so far in the season than touchdown passes allowed. They give up like 5.5 yards per attempt. So just on matchup alone, this has got to be Carr for me.
All right, so now let's try Derek Carr or Sam Howell. What do you think on that one, Harmon?
Yeah, look, the Commanders trade away 2 of their outside pass rushers at the trade deadline. Ownership comes down and says, yep, enough of this. We'll be blowing everything up at the end of the year, so you might as well get some assets for these guys now. And that's going to put Sam Howell in even more like pass-heavy, negative game scripts, which is going to lead to a lot of sacks. That's for sure. He's going to get drilled into the dirt plenty. However, he can still put up fantasy points even as he is doing that. Jahan Dotson has a breakout game last week. I think that is sustainable. So, yeah, give me Sam Howell over Derek Carr, the checkdown king in this one.
No, yeah, the checkdown king is an appropriate nickname. The checkdown king versus the mustache man, Gardner Minshew. What do we think on that one, Barons?
Yeah, a couple of sketchy quarterbacks with great receivers, both of them in good matchups. I like them both in a way as like plug and play guys. If you got a bye week issue, whatever. The matchup for Carr is just stellar though against the Bears, so I'm going to stick with him. Most of this is just like guessing at game script, which is we're often wrong. That often goes awry. But I can see Indy just absolutely running all over Carolina. That's a real possibility to me. I think they both have a pretty clear path to a couple of touchdown passes, but I think Carr's yardage total is a little bit greater.
Yeah, the graphic there also just reminded us that we see Gardner Minshew maybe is better than his numbers and production actually warrant the conversation on Gardner being this year. One more here, Harmon, Derek Carr versus CJ Stroud, the Wonderkind. What do you think?
Oh, come on. Let's get serious. CJ Stroud, please. Like I said, I think there's going to be a lot of pass attempts in this game. I know Andy keeps talking about the matchup against his Bears, which is totally fair, but I don't need Derek Carr with a 75% completion rate, a 5 ADOT, 5 yards per attempt against the Bears defense. No, thank you on that. I'll go with the more exciting player in a game that, again, I think has a little bit more fantasy appeal than Tyler Bagent going into New Orleans to face Dennis Allen's defense. No thanks on that one.
All right, so let's get to one of the biggest stories in the NFL this week and how it impacts fantasy specifically. Gentlemen, I rarely toot my own horn, but it's time to do that. Last week on Inside Coverage, last Thursday, I gave a bold prediction at the end of the show. I said, you want my bold prediction? The Lions are going to destroy the Raiders, and in that process, the Raiders are going to fire Josh McDaniels. I actually predicted it days before it happened. I'm rarely right, but I was right about this one. But it creates a really interesting conversation about what to do from a fantasy standpoint with this team, because they didn't just fire their head coach. They fired their GM, their head coach, their offensive coordinator. They've cut a couple of players. Like, they went all in, scorched earth, rebuild this whole thing. And now they've named Aiden O'Connell the starter moving forward for the remainder of the season, barring injury. All of this has me looking at a team that still has Jakobi Meyers, still has Davante Adams, still has a Josh Jacobs that was supposed to run the football well, and now does not have the offensive mind in Josh McDaniels and Mick Lombardi making the calls. I have to wonder, Harmon, it feels like this week becomes really hard to predict, because how can we know what this team's even going to look like?
Definitely. And my first reaction when I saw, because I'm a sad East Coaster now, wake up to the news that Josh McDaniels has been fired. The first thing I thought was like, yeah, of course he's been fired, because he made the defensible decision to get rid of Derek Carr. That was fine. But then the idea to replace him was, yeah, I'll just bring in Jimmy Garoppolo, which literally nobody thought was a good idea except Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler. I'm sure even Jimmy Garoppolo got the call and was like, what? You want to do what? Like, everybody knew this was not going to work out. It predictably did not work out. So my thought was like, yeah, the Raiders season is over. It's just going to go in the tank. But then I had a good conversation with my buddy James Coe, and we talked about it. And, McDaniels is just look at him on the sideline. He is just an energy suck. He's an energy vampire. He is an energy deflator, to the point that, like, you see Antonio Pierce, like, maybe some weird phrasing in some of the press conferences, but man, the guy's got energy. He brings it. I think you see, I saw a very juicy tweet hit my timeline today, Fitz, from Vic Tafur saying, happiest locker room ever. You saw the video of Davante Adams playing basketball in the locker room, having some fun. I think getting McDaniels the hell up out of there and just the bad vibes that he was creating, like, just even Davante said in the offseason, I don't know about this plan, right, with Jimmy Garoppolo. I got to be talked into this whole thing. Everybody knew it was a bad idea. The bad vibes, it's all out of the way. I don't know that it's going to be great for the Raiders down the stretch, but I think it will at least be more enjoyable, both for them and for us in fantasy.
I think it gets interesting, though, to your point. The last time we saw this happen for the Raiders was Rich Bisaccia. Remember, came in after John Gruden, and John Gruden was fired or resigned, I should say. What's interesting is that team galvanized together, and I actually talked to Max Crosby at the time. We got tattoos together, did this whole interview, and I asked him what happened, and he said it was the players that came together in the locker room that year, and they all said, they looked at each other and said, hey, man, we got two choices. We can put ourselves on the line and we can be something special or not. And they had such great relationships with Bisaccia that it changed the whole outcome for that team moving forward. I'm not saying that's going to happen here with Pierce as a head coach, but I do think vibe and energy matters, and there are so many talented pieces on this team that just haven't been able to perform. It's wild, as Barons, as you pointed out earlier, the lost opportunities for Davante are everywhere. It feels like just a new voice and better play calling can actually make a sizable difference to the production of superstar players.
Yeah, I'll say at the start that I saw the Antonio Pierce introductory press conference, and I'm kind of fired up by it, right? The Raider pride, the callbacks to franchise history, and all that was kind of fun. He seems like he would be like an energizing force in a locker room. I totally get it. We can't not be worried about Davante, but on the other hand, like it also never looks worse than it did last week, right? Like you'll just never see a game of less accurate, uglier quarterback play than we saw from Jimmy Garoppolo a week ago. I don't think Aiden O'Connell is going to be that bad consistently. I will say, we had the person who sent us the question earlier who pointed out that Davante saw 13 targets from O'Connell the last time that O'Connell actually got a start. Josh Jacobs also saw 11 targets. So there was a lot of short stuff to Jacobs. That would be most welcome because he has not had a lot of running room this year. That offensive line hasn't been great. Jacobs is getting hit in the backfield all the time. He's cobbled together a couple of pretty decent fantasy days lately because he's a really good player and he's getting a bunch of volume. But man, if we can unlock, 7-8 targets for Josh Jacobs on the regular, that would be amazing, and it would really save his fantasy season.
I can't say that I'm excited for Sunday, but I can say I'm curious. I'm weirdly curious to see what everything looks like Sunday. I think most fantasy football owners are, and I'll still be, head to toe in Raiders drinking too much while the game goes on. All right, it's almost time for kickoff, so let's get to hurry up offense. This is where we get as many questions as possible. You got to get your answer in under 25 seconds. I'd say, Harmon, last week we didn't miss you. I mean, Coach stepped in and did a really good job on this. Harmon, you're already rested, ready to go. You get to go first on this one. RD says picking 2 from Deontay Johnson, Garrett Wilson, or Davante Adams. What do you think, good sir?
I have said some good things about Deontay Johnson on this program, but he is the guy I'm not going to pick here. Garrett Wilson's getting a ton of first read targets. Davante Adams, I believe in the bounce back. Those are my 2 picks there.
Oh, done with so much efficiency. We run up to the line of scrimmage, get the next call played. I can't even stretch this one up. Radog says, Levis or Love? Parents, I should never say Radog again, but what do you think on this one?
Man, I might just have to filibuster here and not give an answer. I mean, can we run out and pick up Derek Carr? Can we run out and pick up Sam Howell? This is terrible. These are terrible options. I guess I would go Jordan Love. I have a little bit more rushing upside there. I don't feel good about either.
Yeah, if you got Levis or
Adam
Love as your
Gase
option.
profile picture too.
Spectacular. All right, the next question comes up and it says Pitts or Elijah Moore. And then I love this in parentheses. I know. Harmon, what do you think?
That's great. Love the Kirby profile picture on this one too. I'll go Kyle Pitts though. No Drake London. Most likely, look, I think Heineke and Drake London would have a great connection on those. Like, just throw it up there and he's down there somewhere. But for now, it'll be Kyle Pitts on that one.
Time to spare, no less. We run back to the line of scrimmage, and Jeff Cooper says, I have to pick 2 from this group of 3 players who are suddenly experiencing quarterback issues. Jacoby Myers, Jordan Addison, and Darrell Henderson. 12 teams, full PPR. What do you think, Barons?
Yeah, I'd like to just see it for a week with Jacoby Myers and Jordan Addison before I actually start him. If I have an option like Henderson obviously getting a lot of work. He's getting a lot of work near the goal line. That's where I'm going.
God, you guys are efficient. We're like, this is the best practice we've ever had. Batesy says, start one between Stroud, Herbert, and Carr at QB. QB being short for quarterback there, Harmon. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this one, but what would you like to say about this particular selection?
No, I don't have anything more to say about Derek Carr, so it's between C.J. Stroud and Justin Herbert, and I kind of think it's C.J. Stroud. That Jets defense is tough, and I think the wind is out of the sails. A little on Chargers offense!
Oh, yes! Yes! Got him. Joe Horn's cell phone chimes in and says, Moss or Singletary if Pierce is out. Barons, what do you think?
Oh man, great to hear from Joe Horn's cell phone. That's just a wonderful name. I would play Zach Moss here, and I know he's a second fiddle sort of player, but this matchup against Carolina is so good. They give up almost 5 yards per carry. It's about as good as a matchup gets. So Moss is going to be my play. That I get it with Singletary, might step into a lot of work, but Moss has the matchup.
Tangent nobody needed, but second fiddle is still harder to play than most instruments. Okay, next up, Al Pankoff says, running back position, Jaylen Warren tonight, Aaron Jones or Cam Akers. I need to play 2 of the 3 listed above. Harmon, what say you?
Brutal. I mean, I guess it's got to be Jaylen Warren. You can't play Cam Akers. No full-time role. Not very good. So it's Aaron Jones and Jaylen Warren, I guess.
Wow, said with a little bit of disgust in his voice. You even got yourself in that position. Now be better. Sal coming up next. Hashtag AskFFL. DeAndre Hopkins or DJ Moore. There's not even a way for me to stretch this one, Barons. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I gave you the stat earlier. DeAndre Hopkins is averaging 3 touchdowns per game in the Will Levis era. I am definitely going that route. It's a great matchup against Pittsburgh. I don't trust this Bagent experience. No, thank you.
Look, I feel for you, but we're too efficient today. Question number 9 coming up. We got Doug Powell asking G. Edwards, A. Jones, DeMercado, ... Only one spot. Harmon, what do you think?
How come DeMercado didn't get the E? DeMercado. I mean, come on, man. I do think G. Edwards is my pick here. I believe that, he's going to get that red zone work, as Andy mentioned, and he's the early down grinder, so I'll go with him here.
I would just like to point out it's impressive I didn't read Gedwards or a Jones. All right. TB coming in with the quality Funko and saying 2 of DK, Olave, and Pittman. What do you think, Barons?
Yeah, I know you're frustrated with Olave, but the targets have certainly been there. The matchup this week against the Bears is great. I got to go that route. I got to go Pittman, too. Pittman is seeing like 10 targets a game. His matchup also outstanding against Carolina. The issue for Metcalf, the matchup this week against Baltimore.
All right, let's get one more in here on the hurry-up offense. Comes from Nicholas Bray with the profile picture. Okay, Ford, Henderson, or Chuba this week for my RB2. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot of like, Chuba Hubbard in fantasy because he's been better than Miles Sanders. But like, come on, bro, the bar is the floor. Or give me a break on that one. Darrell Henderson, no thanks, the backup quarterback. I'll go with Jerome Ford. I do think when he's healthy, it won't be a 3-way backfield like it was last week.
All right, you guys know the drill by now. Join us every Thursday, every week, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Check out our whole library of podcasts, including the Fantasy Football Show, the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show in the app. Obviously, you can check back in Sunday morning for our latest on player injuries. And our own Scott Pianowski will be answering your last-minute lineup questions on social media at #AskFFL. It takes a whole group of people that put in a ton of work. We thank all of them to make this show happen. And we thank you guys for hanging out with us this week and every week. Good luck to all your teams in Week 9. We'll see you next Thursday.